Very formal.
Very.
So welcome. Welcome, everyone. My name is Debbie Keener. I am the head of marketing and special projects here at the Oceanside Library. I would like to introduce my colleague and fellow presenter and friend, head of adult services, Nadine Spano. We are known here at the Oceanside Library as Deb and Nay, and we have a book discussion called On the Same Page with Deb and Nay, and a podcast, Books and Banter with Deb and Nay.
We like to talk.
We like to talk, and we like to put our name on everything. We encourage everyone to go to pagingoceanside.com so that you can learn more about our author series and the books that we will be discussing. Lastly, Nadine and I would like to thank everyone here at the Oceanside Library for giving us the opportunity to offer events like this one to the community.
So this evening we have William Kent Krueger with us. He goes by Kent. He writes the New York Times best-selling author of the Cork O'Connor mystery series, set in the great North Woods of Minnesota, he's coming to us from St. Paul this evening. He's a four-time Anthony Award winner, and his 2013 standalone novel, Ordinary Grace, which is also very popular with our readers here, received the Edgar Award for Best Novel. This Tenderland, the companion novel, was published in 2019 and spent 6 months among the top 10 on the New York Times bestseller list. He does all of his writing in wonderfully funky coffee shops in St. Paul. I love that. Welcome, Ken. We're so happy to have you.
Pleasure to be with you this evening.
Love coffee shops. It's and writers and authors. That's the cozy librarian vibe right there.
Right, exactly.
You got it. So thank you for joining us and sharing your time. Before we came on, we were, just so everyone knows, we were chatting a little bit, and we filled Kent in on how much we love his novels, and this Tenderland was one that we chose for our book discussion that many of you remember from 2020. So Kent, I was reading your bio, especially your one online on your website, and your official bio, and you moved around a lot in your life. You've lived in several different places. Can you tell us about that, and where were you in your life when you got the spark to be a writer?
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer right from the get-go. My father was a high school English teacher. And so, I had parents who I hope, like your parents, read to me when I was a kid. I never went down for a nap. I never went to bed at night without a story being read to me. So I grew up thinking of the world in terms of stories, and I always wanted to be a storyteller. I was always writing. I love telling this to audiences. The first story I remember writing was a short story in the 3rd grade. It was called The Walking Dictionary. When I was a kid, my father, the high school English teacher, was always storming around the house ranting something like, "Nobody uses dictionaries enough. Nobody uses dictionaries enough." So in the 3rd grade, I wrote a short story called The Walking Dictionary, which was in fact about a dictionary that didn't think it was being used enough. It magically sprouted legs so that it could, toddle off into the world and go to the people who needed it. My 3rd grade teacher would gaga over that story. My folks oohed and awed over that story. I swear to you, in the 3rd grade, I knew I was destined to be a writer. So I have always been writing. I served kind of a long apprenticeship. I didn't publish my first novel, Iron Lake, the first in the Cork O'Connor series, until I was almost 48 years old.
Wow. So you were born in Wyoming, correct?
My
And
father
where
was
did your
teaching.
travels take you?
Yeah, my father was teaching English in Wyoming, and I was the 3rd of 3 boys, and then I have a younger sister. But as soon as I was born, my father had realized that they weren't paying English teachers enough to support a family in Wyoming. So he left the teaching profession for a while, went into the oil business, which is why I moved around so much as a kid. Finally, he got tired of the oil business, or maybe they got tired of him. And he went back to teaching, and we moved a few more times after that. But I think a lot of it was simply that I had parents who, they were nomads at heart.
Yeah. Did your dad write?
No, he didn't.
He didn't. I know a lot of readers are writers as well. So
Right. Wow, that's great. So we also read that you like to write in coffee shops, and we were actually laughing, in Tangletown, which sounds like a place like in Disneyland, like let's go to Tangletown. Where is that? Do you still go there? Do you still visit?
Well, I began my writing in coffee shops when I was living in Tangletown, which is a little enclave here in St. Paul, very lovely area. And my wife had just entered law school, and I suddenly became the sole support of the family. I was a guy who had to keep a roof overhead and food on the table, but I wanted desperately to be a writer. We were living 2 blocks from this iconic cafe in St. Paul, a place called the St. Clair Broiler, that opened its doors at 6 o'clock every morning. So I pitched this idea to my wife. I said, Diane, if you're willing to get the kids up and dressed and off to school first thing, so I can go write. I promise you, when I get home at the end of the day, I will be the best husband, the best father you can possibly imagine. She bought it. So at 6 o'clock every morning at the broiler, it turned out to be 7 days a week. I was there at 6 o'clock in the morning when they opened their doors. And I would spend the first hour and 15 minutes of every morning writing. Then I would catch a bus to work. And that's how I worked for, well, I was there for a quarter of a century.
Wow.
Then I published I got my first contract for the Cork O'Connor series, and I jumped ship. But I still do all my writing. Well, before the pandemic descended, I did all my writing in coffee shops.
Yeah.
Since the pandemic has made a shelter in place, I have exchanged my kitchen counter for the coffee shop. But I still get up at 6 o'clock, 7 days a week, and spend 2 or 3 hours writing.
Do you find mornings are energetic for you? Like I enjoy early mornings myself. I feel like I get so much done. Is that why you write in the morning, or was it just time? That's what worked for your family life?
Well, some of it was the time. When my wife entered law school and I had to come up with some way to develop as a writer, it was actually Ernest Hemingway who showed me the way. One of the things I knew about Hemingway was that he loved nothing better than to rise at first light and spend the first couple of hours of every day writing. He thought it was the most creative time of the day. So that's why I started going to the coffee shop. And I don't know if I've always been a morning person, but I certainly have developed into a morning person. But for me, the thing is this, your life gets really complicated, and there are an enormous number of demands on your time and your energy. If I write first thing in the morning, I've taken care of that part of me that needs to be taken care of. And then I can go out into the world and give to it whatever I need to give to it, because I've already taken care of myself. I've already done what I need to do as an artist in that day.
That's really great.
That's wonderful. You actually, in Lightning Strike, there's something you write there about Cork delivering the papers in the morning, and I think it's his father who says to him, you're going to enjoy that morning time alone to develop. So actually what you're saying now just brought that into my head.
Yes,
about the book.
That was actually one of the quotes that I took a picture of, was about dawn rising.
Right.
I can't remember the exact words. I'm sure you know what they are, but it was about dawn rising in the morning. So that resonated.
Yes, it resonated with me too.
Really, very much. Your first book published was Iron Lake?
Iron Lake, the first in the Cork O'Connor series.
And was that your first published novel?
Yes.
And how did that come about? How did you get that there where it needed to be?
Oh, thank you for asking, because I love telling this story.
Oh, good.
So, my father, the high school English teacher, when I was 18 years old, insisted I read Ernest Hemingway, and I fell madly in love with Hemingway. I liked his prose well enough, sure, but what I really fell in love with was that mythic image of Ernest Hemingway. And I tried for decades to write the great American novel as Ernest Hemingway might have written it. But I hit my I hit my early 40s and went through a midlife crisis and decided the hell with trying to write the great American novel. I want to write something somebody might actually want to read. So I looked around me to see what people read. You know what everybody reads? Everybody reads mysteries. It's a genre whose appeal cuts across all socioeconomic levels. So I thought I decided I'm going to write a mystery. Took me 4 years to put together the manuscript for Iron Lake, because I was working full time and I had no idea how to write a mystery. So I was learning my way. When the book was, I thought I had the manuscript as fine as I could write it. I did what you were supposed to do back then. This was in the mid 1990s. I sent query letters to 36 New York agents. I got 6 responses. All of them said, no, thank you very much. But some friends of mine who also were trying to be writers went to a mystery writers conference at that point. And when they came back, they told me, we have your agent. The keynote speaker that year was a woman named Jane Jordan Brown, who had a literary agency in Chicago, and her keynote speech was, how do you get an agent? My friends brought me back a tape of her talk, and when I listened to it, I realized she wasn't saying to these would-be writers, these would-be authors, this is how you get just any old agent. She was saying, this is how you get me, Jane Jordan Brown, as your agent. And when I listened really carefully, it seemed to me all she was suggesting to those writers that if they wanted her to consider them, they needed to say something very nice about her in their query letters. So I came up with a great compliment to pay Jane, and my query letter with it. I sent it off, and 2 weeks later, Jane called and said, I want to see your manuscript.
Wow.
I sent it to her, and 6 weeks later, she got back to me. She said, I'm not going to represent you. Your manuscript's too long. It was 500 pages. She said, I can't sell a first author manuscript this long, but if you're willing to cut it by 100 pages, I'll be happy to look at it again. You know, that was like asking me to cut off my right arm.
Of course, yes.
But if that's what it's going to take, that's what I was going to do. So I reeled it in, and over the next year, I cut it actually by 120 pages. I sent it back to Jane. She said, this is exactly what I was looking for. I will represent you. Let's go. She sent that manuscript in November of that particular year to 6 of the largest New York publishing houses with this very bold demand. Do you want to publish Kent's book? Give us an answer by Christmas. Now, what I didn't know about the publishing business in New York City is nothing happens at Christmas. For 2 weeks before Christmas, 2 weeks after Christmas, they leave the city. They go to the Poconos or the Berkshires or, you know, Florida, wherever they go for vacation. And the publishing industry pretty much grinds to a halt over the holidays. So Christmas rolls around, haven't heard anything. New Year's rolls around, haven't heard anything. I still remember this really bleak night in the middle of January. I'm sitting at the kitchen table. Diane, my wife, is beside me trying to console me. I got my head in my hands and I'm whining something like, nobody wants my book. Nobody wants my book. Well, I get a call from Jane the next day, or it might have been the day after that, saying somebody wants your book. She explained that it was an offer from St. Martin's Press, one of the large, very fine mystery imprints in New York. She said, it's a first author contract, not a lot of money, but somebody wants your book. I said, wonderful, Jane. Where do I sign? And she said, you're not going to sign because I think you're going to get another offer. The next day, we got an offer from Simon & Schuster, and it was a significantly better offer. I said, wonderful, Jane. Where do I sign? And she said, you're not going to sign because I called St. Martin's and told them about Simon & Schuster's offer. I think they'll make a counter offer. So the next day we get a counter offer from St. Martin's. They said, not only will we give him more money for Iron Lake, we know he's at work on a second novel, we'll buy that one too. I said, wonderful, Jane. Where do I sign? And Jane said, you're not going to sign because I called Simon & Schuster and told them about St. Martin's offer. I think they'll make a counter offer. And the next day we got a 2-book counter offer from Simon & Schuster that was so good we couldn't turn it down. You know, it's every author's dream that a big war will break out for their works, and that's exactly what happened for me with my first novel.
I like Jane.
I like Jane too.
See, that's a great story.
That
Oh my
is.
gosh.
Wow.
Did you know that it was going to be part of a series? Were you planning to do a second in the series, or were you just?
I don't think any writer, when they're
Goes.
of a series, when they start are really thinking, well, this is going to be a series. Mostly it's just, God, I hope it's good enough somebody will want to publish it.
Well, that's a great story.
I
That's a great
know.
start. So we read that your radical activities got you kicked out of Stanford. What was your major, and can you share some with us? What was the good stuff that came out of that experience?
Sure. I didn't have a major my first year of college. I was just, you know, like every college freshman trying to figure out what the hell college was all about. Who was I there? I'd matriculated in the fall of 1969. This was at the height of the Vietnam War. Stanford had a relationship with an organization at that point called the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, whose primary source of income, at least back then, was research in military weaponry. There were a lot of us at Stanford who felt that was an inappropriate relationship for an institution like Stanford to maintain, particularly at that point in history. So we petitioned the trustees, we petitioned the administration, we marched, we demonstrated. Nobody listened to us because, of course, there were enormous sums of money involved. So finally, in frustration, one day, a group of us marched into the administration building and occupied it. The president of the university said, fine, I'm not going to give you any problem. He vacated the building and we took it over. So that night about 8 o'clock, we had a band come in and we held a dance where typically we would have been registering. And midnight, the band packed up and took off. And those of us who were going to occupy the building rolled out our sleeping bags and went to sleep. Huge tactical error, because at 1 a.m., the Palo Alto riot squad swept through and arrested us. I was on a full scholarship that evaporated, and I had to thank them.
But look at you.
I know.
Oh my goodness. Wow, what a story.
Yeah.
And you know, I was thinking about this because I just read Lightning Strike, and it takes place in 1963, which was a real pivotal year in, U.S. history with the assassination of JFK, and you mentioned the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, but you went back in time with Cork. So why to 1963? Why that time? Why that place?
I made Cork essentially the same age I would have been at that point in time. And I gave him a lot of the memories that I still possess from that period in my life. 12, 13 years old, that's an important period for a male. I don't know what it's like for women, but it's really an important time for guys. We're standing in that threshold to our manhood, So I have always had a pretty clear memory of the things that occurred when I was 12 or 13 years old. Mm-hmm. So I gave a lot of that to Cork. And it made it much easier to create Cork then as an adolescent. And because it was easy to imagine Cork at that age, it really made it much easier for me to imagine the relationship Cork had with his father, the relationship he had with his mother, the relationship his parents had with each other. It was also a time in our history when our treatment of Native Americans continued to be abysmal. It hasn't improved much these days, but that was something that I wanted to build into the story. And if you've read the book, you know that the Relocation Act of 1956, which had a devastating effect on Native communities, was still having tremendous impact. And I wanted to talk about that. So 63 sounded like a pretty good year for me. It's set before Kennedy is assassinated, so I didn't need to bring that terrible tragedy into the story.
Jill Munson 2@gmail. Join the meeting.
Sorry, when someone comes in through the phone, that happens.
That's okay.
So there are 18 books in the Cork O'Connor mystery series. Lightning Strike is a prequel where we meet Cork, as you just mentioned, as a teen. It is a coming of age story. So why, after 18 books, did you feel you wanted to go back and visit Cork as a young man?
Well, I pretty much did it at the insistence of my agent. For anybody who's read the Cork O'Connor series, the first 17 books in the series span 15 years in the lives of Cork O'Connor and his family. And often in those stories, I've made reference to events and individuals in Cork's early life who were important or that were important in shaping him into the man who occupies center stage in the series. And my agent for years has been telling me, this is really rich territory, Kent, this past, you have to mine it. And I guess, honestly, I didn't have another story idea, so I thought, what the hell? And I'm really happy that she convinced me that I should do this, because I had just an extraordinary time creating the world of Cork O'Connor at 12, 13 years of age.
I mean,
it's such, because I haven't read any of the other Cork O'Connor books.
Right.
So, and I was going to start, and then I read somewhere you said, if you're going to start with Lightning Strike. I don't know if you really said that, but that's what I did. And
well, that's pretty much what I advise these days. Before Lightning Strike, when I got asked that question, I would explain, because of that 15-year transition in all of their lives, it's best if you start at the beginning and read in order. It's just a much richer experience. But now I tell people, no, start with Lightning Strike. You don't need to know anything about the Cork O'Connor series in order to enjoy the story. And if you like me as a storyteller, if you appreciate the elements that you find in the Cork O'Connor in Lightning Strike, which you will find in all of the other Cork O'Connor novels, then give my series a try and start with Iron Lake.
Okay. Did you this is supposed to be your favorite lightning strike of the series. Does that still hold true, or is whatever the most recent one your favorite? How do you how do you pick a favorite? It's like children.
It is like children. And with 18 children out there, it's really tough. I do have some favorites in the Cork O'Connor series for a variety of reasons. Iron Lake among them, because it was my first child. There's a book sort of in the middle of the series called Thunder Bay, which is the backstory of Henry Malou, the Ojibwe Day, and how he became the remarkable individual he is. I love that story. Sulphur Springs, a little bit later in the series for a variety of reasons, and Lightning Strike.
And you have, your characters, we were talking about adolescence, and they really come through adolescence with, in the middle of this crime. Even in this Tenderland, there was peril or some kind of traumatic event. So they kind of explore their adolescence through that. How is that simply because of what you said already about it being a crime and a mystery, and is that something for the reader, or is there a reason you want these young people to be seen, witnessing some traumatic event and coming to age in that story? That doesn't happen very often to many kids, but in your novels they do, and it's really, really interesting.
Well, it was a natural thing for this tender land because it's set in 1932, deep in the Great Depression, and the Great Depression families were shattered. There were, I think the estimates were 250, 300,000 kids out there without parents who were trying to make their way in the world. So it was a fairly natural thing to create a situation where the vagabonds in that story, were having to fend for themselves. In the Cork O'Connor story, it's just, I write murder mysteries. So something dramatic had to happen. And, really, when you're telling a story, you're looking for that which can provide you with great suspense and drama. And so if you have these kids investigating a murder or a death, a crime, it becomes much more dramatic, much more immediate.
It had a little Stand By Me feeling, lightning strike. I kept going back to that in my mind,
But also this Tenderland, in many ways, you have this great ability to create these characters that they share a bond, like they become a brotherhood. And it's just to watch it to read it and it's unfolding before your eyes. It's just amazing. Like you really feel these characters.
And their emotions for adolescents are very sophisticated. Their commitments to one another. I like how you touch upon that. I think we had one of our discussion members say once that what he loved about this Tenderland was that you wrote children, the adolescents, young teens, in a very realistic way. You didn't pander to the age. They had sophistication in their emotional life and what they were facing, and I think it makes it that much more touching to read.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I find it easy, particularly to write from the male adolescent point of view, because I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think men don't really mature much past their adolescence. I think we're always stuck at 13 years of age. So it's easy for me to connect with Cork and also with the kids in this tender land at that age. And if you read Ordinary Grace, the narrator there, Frank Drum, is also 13 years of age in that story. It just has appealed to me for a variety of reasons. And I think the narrative voice of an adolescent is really a compelling voice because there is a great deal of wonderment in it. There is still some naivety in it. And there is that sad edge of realizations about what the world is really like coming into play.
Yeah, I know you've done some standalone novels as well. What's that? We've spoken to a few authors who have done series and standalone. Do you prefer writing one over the other? And what made you switch gears a little bit from the Cork series?
They both have their appeal. I love writing a story in the Cork O'Connor series because Cork and I have been buddies for a very long time now. And we haven't grown tired of each other's company. And I appreciate that. Plus, a Cork O'Connor story is I like it because when I write a new story, I'm not starting from square one. You know, I've created characters, a setting, elements that readers expect in a particular story. But I like the standalones because I'm able to broaden my reach. My canvas is much larger, and I can talk about things on a deeper level than often the Cork O'Connor stories will allow me. So both Ordinary Grace and This Tender Land, one of the threads that runs through both of those novels is the importance of the spiritual journey that we're all on. Although that is a part of some of the Cork O'Connor stories, the standalones have allowed me to go more deeply, explore more deeply the importance of the spiritual journey in our lives, just as an example. But they're larger canvases, and I really appreciate the freedom that allows me to explore all kinds of ideas that that a mystery really, really doesn't allow.
Mhm. Actually, that was one of our questions in Lightning Strike and in This Tender Land. You create these beautiful stories where you speak of land, God, spirituality, and they play very important roles in the character's development. As you just said, you'd like to, your standalones expand on that. Why do you feel you do explore those themes in your stories? Is it something?
I think if you're a wise storyteller, you write about those elements of life that intrigue you. And so I often explore those things that I love to try to figure out what exactly is it about it, these things that I love. And so the landscape is certainly one of those. When I moved to Minnesota, I fell in love with the Great North Woods. And when I'm writing a Cork O'Connor novel, I'm just writing about how much I love this adopted home of mine. I spent my adolescence in the Midwest, and when I write a story set in southern Minnesota, in the Minnesota River Valley, which is a very agrarian environment, very Midwest, all of the love that I had for that place as an adolescent just pours out. I'm not sure where that question started, but there you go.
Yeah,
I want to add to that.
You're talking about the land, and it brought me to the Native American culture that you spoke about in several novels, but in Lightning Strike, it was, you took a topic and you spoke about it with such accuracy and respect. This straddles, we were talking about how Cork really straddles two worlds in a way. And you present them both in such a respectful way. And I happen to have a strong feeling about Native American culture myself. So I was so drawn into the way that you did it in a way that wasn't, I'm going to say cheesy, but sometimes that's how I feel it is when I read books. And you really made it so believable and beautiful and true. What is it about the Native American culture? Were you bringing awareness, or do you must have some sort of love for that culture as well?
For those people who might be watching who have never read one of my Cork O'Connor novels, Cork is a man of mixed heritage. He's part Irish American and he's part Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, which is the largest tribal affiliation we have here in northern Minnesota. And when I moved to Minnesota, my wife and I began spending a great deal of time up north because it's so beautiful. And that's what I decided when I got serious about writing. I wanted to write about the North Country. And when I took a look at the North Country, I realized you can't tell a true story set in northern Minnesota without including the Ojibwe as an element of the work, because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, and it's powerful. So I decided I was going to write about the Ojibwe in my work. And then, of course, at that point, I knew about what every white person knows about the Native cultures we live shoulder to shoulder with, which was nothing. But once I left Stanford, the college I went to next, I became an anthropology major. So the idea of learning about this culture, not my own, was pretty exciting. And I approached it sort of in the beginning from an cultural anthropologist point of view, mostly just reading. But then I began to meet members of the Ojibwe culture and form relationships that have over the years become important friendships. So what I what's important to me now is that as much as I can, I talk about issues that are significant to the Native people here, issues that arise very often out of the conflict of the two cultures, white and Ojibwe. And so I think it's important to try to do my best to get that right, to be as honest as I can in its presentation, and maybe if I can open a few eyes.
It's extraordinary, actually. There are certain things actually for in this Tenderland, when I was reading that, the story of the Lincoln School and what Mose finds out about the Sioux Indian when he was when in the story, when he finds out what happens to the children, and we find out about all the orphan children and the missing Native American children. And just recently on the news, they were talking about the grave sites that were found up in Canada, I believe. So I just remember reading this book, and it actually, I mean, you did open my eyes, because I actually went in and started reading articles about this tragedy. So thank you for that for me, because I feel like I did educate myself, because I really didn't know anything about this until I read this book, and then decided to kind of go in and start reading some articles. So I thank you for that. So
I'm happy to hear that, and you're welcome.
yeah,
Wonderful. So what are you working on now? Are you still writing for well, I was thinking about the series, and first question, do you know when a series ends as a writer? Do you know when to end it? Not that I want you to at all, but I've never asked we had another series writer on, and I want, like, how do you know when it's time? And do you think you will know? And what are you working on now?
Yeah, I hope I know when it's time. A very long time ago, I promised myself, I think every reader probably has had this experience. You stumble across a series that you really love, you get deeply involved in it, and you're maybe 9, 10, 11 books into the series, and then you come across one that has no heart. It's so different from all the others. It has no heart, there's no spirit in it. And I think you're reading a contractual obligation. A writer signed a multi-book contract, is tired of it, but has to deliver something, and there it is. I hope I never put a book out there that I haven't invested my heart in fully. And I promised myself a long time ago that if I ever get to the point where I am tired, I feel weary writing the Cork O'Connor series, I'll stop. I'm not at that place yet. And I'm working on number 19 in the series, the revisions to number 19 in the series, a book called Fox Creek that will be out in August of next year. And I'm just enjoying the hell out of it.
Oh, good.
Great.
I have 2 more Cork O'Connor novels under contract, and in the meantime, once I finish Fox Creek, I'll return to working on the third companion novel to Ordinary Grace in This Tender Land. It will be set in the Minnesota River Valley, as were both of those works, and it will also be set in an earlier time, as were those, and probably deal with many of the same themes.
Do you work on multiple stories? Like, when you get the idea, do you have like a big chart in your writing office or your kitchen
Post-it
counter?
notes.
And like, how do you keep, because you already know what's coming so far in advance. So how do you keep that all together and organized?
Well, it all depends on the kind of story I'm writing. If I'm writing a Cork O'Connor story, those are all mysteries. And, mystery is a very tightly woven fabric of storytelling. Everything depends so significantly on everything else. And I think the success of a mystery depends largely on the timing of the reveals. When do you give the reader the clues that are going to be necessary to solving the mystery at the heart of it? So I think my Cork O'Connor stories through as completely as I can before I ever put my fingers to the keyboard. At the end of that thinking process, I know how the story begins, I know how it ends, I know who did what to whom and why, I know the themes I want to weave through the story. But with my standalones, I take a different approach. Those come from a different place. Those really come from, I hate to say this, but a deeper place. And I want the reader to feel that, like they're coming from my heart. And so I look for a more organic approach. In those stories, I know very little about the story I'm going to tell. I just know usually a few salient elements. So, for example, in This Tender Land, going into the writing of it, I knew that it was going to be my homage to Mark Twain, my updated version of Huckleberry Finn. I knew that I was going to structure it in the way that Homer structured the Odyssey, and every experience that the vagabonds had would mirror an experience that Odysseus had in his long journey from Troy back to Ithaca. And I knew that it was going to be set in the Great Depression because one of the issues I wanted to explore is the question of who we are at heart as human beings, particularly during periods of great privation or periods when great stress is put on us as a people, as we've been experiencing, for example, in the last year and a half with the pandemic. In these periods, are we the kind of people who retreat into ourselves and protect only that which is important to us? Or are we the kind of people who open our arms and despite how little we might have, we're willing to share it with those who have less? And I couldn't think of a better time to explore that issue than the Great Depression. So I knew that. And then I launched myself into the writing of it and I let the story reveal itself to me as I progressed.
That's amazing.
It is.
It's so amazing. I love to listen to you speak, actually. I feel like I'm reading a book while you're... So our book club picked this tender land during the pandemic. We mentioned that before. So we love our book club. They foster curiosity and great conversation. Are you part of a book club?
I have led the book club for my church for 20 plus years now.
Oh, wow. That's great.
I bet you've picked a few of your own novels.
Well, I haven't, but the group has insisted.
That must be so interesting. Are they very forthcoming with you about if they didn't like the book, or do they just have to say that they like it, even if they didn't?
Well, I hope that the books I write, I hope the books I write are good enough that mostly what's going to be said are good things.
Yeah.
But people always have niggles. You know, every storyteller knows when you write your story and you put it out there, it's no longer your story. Those people who read it come to it with their own preconceived ideas, their own perceptions, their own prejudices. And what they read into a story are often things that you never intended to be in there, but it's their story now. So, you know, I try to listen and explain and not argue.
That's one of our favorite things in our book club, is to hear the different perspectives of a novel. And then we always try to meet up with the author at some point as well. And then some of the books that we really did not appreciate so much, after speaking to the author from their perspective, it was just
opens your eyes.
Yeah, amazing. And the group would say the same thing. And then, you know, getting everyone's point of view on a topic. It really is, once you put the book out there, it's kind of out there. I don't read book reviews before I read the book. I mean, I'll read what's on the back, but I don't go in depth on Goodreads or anything like that, for that very reason. Is I don't want to be tainted by anyone else's point of view. Do you read reviews of your book though?
Before I answer that question, Nay.
Yes, yes, Nay is great.
I love that. Deb and Nay. I just want to say that it's not an uncommon experience, at least for me, to go to the book club with a particular perception of what I've read. And occasionally it's not a very good perception, but I leave that discussion having a greater appreciation for the story because of all that's been revealed to me by what everybody else saw in it. I think book groups are great for that. And what was the question then that I was supposed to answer after that?
I was talking about reviews and how there's so many reviews and ratings now for almost everything all the time. And it really does sometimes taint a story. And I wonder if it taints the way you see your own story or how you are going to write your next story. And do you even read them or just do your thing?
I do my best not to read them, but you know, you get curious. And the problem with it is you read 100 really wonderful reviews, and then you read somebody who didn't like your book at all. And you go to bed and it's not the 100 good reviews you're thinking of. It's that one that said, boy, is this a stinker? And you're going, well, why? You know? So I try my best not to read the reviews. I'm certainly not affected by the reviews in terms of what I do going forward with my next story. No, I've been a storyteller for so long. I feel really comfortable with who I am and the kind of story I can tell. So it doesn't really impact me at all.
And what do you like to read on your own? What kind of novels have you been reading?
Well, I read a lot for my book group.
Yes.
This year, every year, I don't know about your group, but every year we try to have some sort of a focus for the stories that we're going to read. And this year, because of the pandemic, we have decided to read only those books that talk about people who have had some sort of an uplifting effect. So we're reading. Last month was The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek, which was just a wonderful story. This month we're reading Jane Goodall's autobiography, Reason for Hope. So those are my two most recent reads. I also read a lot of ARCs, Advanced Readers Copies.
Mhm.
For those of you who are watching, that is a book, a bound galley of a book that's going to be coming out many, many months in the future. But I've been asked to read it to offer a dust jacket quote. That thing that appears across the title. Stephen King says this is the best thing since the Bible. When I broke into the business, established authors were willing to do that for me, and so it's one way that those of us who are established now try to give back. But when I actually can choose what I want to read, I very often will choose another Midwest author because I love Midwest authors. I love the sensibility that we have about the land here, and I've never read a Midwest author that doesn't write beautifully in a heartfelt way about the Midwest.
Wow. So when you're not reading and writing, what are your hobbies and interests?
Well, I used to play tennis. I was a huge tennis player, but my knees have given out on me. So I had to get off the court. And what I've done is I've channeled all of that energy into biking. I bike. I'm an enormous biker. I bike pretty much every day. And here in the Twin Cities, it's a city that has dedicated itself to being very bike friendly. We have wonderful bike paths. So I'm always up, and the Mississippi River runs through us. So biking along, there's nothing quite as extraordinary as biking along the Mississippi River, particularly in the fall. It's just beautiful. So I do that. My wife and I walk and hike a great deal. I try to spend time with my family as much as possible. I do some volunteer work through my church, so I keep myself pretty busy. And I'm always doing Zooms and going out there and doing conferences and book festivals and that kind of thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, love it. We want to invite everyone who's watching to type their questions in the chat. If you have any questions, please share them with us.
And is there anything you're most proud of in your writing career so far? Like, what's that one thing? Is there?
Or a few things.
The one thing.
Well, you told us this wonderful story about how you got Iron Lake, and I think that was pretty amazing.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of the most extraordinary moments in
Yeah.
my career as a writer, certainly.
Are you still friends with was her name Jane?
Jane.
Are you still friends?
Friends with who?
Jane, was her name Jane? Your
Oh,
literary.
yeah, Jane Jordan Brown. Unfortunately, Jane passed away several years ago.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I'm still with that agency, and I swear to God, I have the best agent in the business.
That's wonderful.
Good. Okay.
Do you want to go through some of the comments? So we have a few comments in the chat. We'll just go through quickly. Hi, Evelyn and Jess. My fellow librarian friends are here.
And Evelyn shared with us, you are an amazing storyteller. And
Thank you, Evelyn.
And coming from Evelyn, she reads more than anyone I know.
Oh, good.
For her to say that, she is.
Joanne writes, saw Kent on my first pandemic author Zoom last year. Subsequently read all Kent's books. Love them all.
Whoa. Thank you.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
That's great. Evelyn also Ordinary Grace. Okay. Marcia said, you're a treat to listen to. Thank you, from Marcia.
You're welcome, Marcia.
Joanne just asked, what are some recent selections of your book club, which you did mention. Vera, I love all mysteries. Phyllis, I have loved your standalone books, An Ordinary Grace and This Tender Land. I will have to try the series. Thank you for this author discussion. It is very enlightening.
Oh, wonderful. And I hope you enjoy my Cork O'Connor stories, and thank you for giving them a try.
And Vera, I agree with Phyllis. Definitely try the series. Looking forward to it. So I think we have some people who are going to start the Cork O'Connor series.
Yes. Well, you know, it's always so
Which is why every author does these things, right?
Yes. Discovering new books, series is the most exciting thing as a reader.
I agree.
It's an endless amount of things. And sometimes I always feel like I'm behind, like, oh my God, how did I not read that?
Right.
But there's always something to discover. And I think that it's so nice when you share time like this as well. It just gives us so much more to enjoy and to read. And now when we read your books, we'll be thinking about this, and it's just, it's wonderful.
I'm definitely going to start reading
Yeah.
them. Has anyone ever approached you about doing like a Netflix series for?
Well, I've been dealing with Hollywood since Iron Lake came out over 20 years ago. And periodically, the Cork O'Connor series gets shopped around. Nobody's picked it up yet. That's not a big deal to me. This Tender Land, let's see, Ordinary Grace is currently under contract and the screenplay is being written. It's being written as a multi-episode series for one of the platforms.
Wow.
And we have been approached by, I think, 4 different production companies now for the rights to This Tender Land. We've turned them all down, but I think the production company we're dealing with now, I love this guy. I think we may have a deal.
That's really exciting. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
That's
Thank you.
wonderful to hear.
Well, don't hold your breath.
Oh, we'll keep on.
Nothing happens quick in Hollywood.
I
Yeah.
know. Actually, every time we speak to an author, they say the same thing. Nothing happens in like it's always slow moving. And you
Yeah.
always think Hollywood it would be fast, but I guess not. Oh,
Nope.
no.
In Hollywood, everything moves at 2 speeds, slow and glacial.
Well, we hope it works out. We hope it's not too glacial, maybe just a little slow. And I know we would love, now there's more of a reason for us all to be reading
yes.
all of these books. So I think it's time. We'd like to do our little lightning round with you.
Okay.
If you have some time. So we will set a timer for 1 minute, and we're just going to ask you a series of questions that are fun. And just answer the best you can.
Do you want to do the clock?
Yeah, I'll set up. I'm
Okay.
setting up the clock. All right, hang on.
I'm nervous.
Oh,
No.
don't be.
Okay.
All right,
We're
go.
putting 60 seconds. Movies in the theater or at home?
I haven't seen a movie in a theater in forever because of the pandemic. And I have to admit, I have kind of become a fan of all of the streaming movies that are available to me.
True.
You're not alone.
I just need to get a gigantic screen is all.
Yeah. What shows are you currently binging?
We just finished watching Only Murders in the Building. Loved that
Oh,
show.
yes.
You were doing
Um,
it.
And we've been binging on some great BBC productions. We just finished watching all of the Shetland by the Anne Cleland. Is it Anne Cleland? Whatever.
Okay.
Stories. Yeah, the
Oh,
Shetland
okay.
stories.
I loved Only Murders in the Building. It was great.
Oh, so did I.
So I'll have to watch it.
Yes. What was your favorite quarantine snack or cocktail?
Oh, cocktail. Well, I have to say, I'm not a big fan of hard liquor, but I consumed a vat of wine. I'm sure. My favorite wine in the winter tends to be, or in the summer tends to be a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Love the crispness and the grapefruit overtones. And in the winter, it's Meiomi Pinot Noir.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That's a minute, but we're going to keep asking.
Yeah, we have 2 more. Okay. So books or movies that give you a good cry or a good laugh?
A good laugh. Who doesn't laugh at Young Frankenstein? Maybe my all-time favorite send-up of horror movies. A good cry. Oh, Old Yeller. Who doesn't cry? Old?
Yes.
I never saw Old Yeller.
You didn't? Don't
No.
see it. You're a dog person too.
Oh,
It's-
okay, then I won't.
yeah, it's a good one though.
What character of a book, not yours, or a TV movie series would you like to have dinner with?
Atticus Finch.
Okay, yes. I did read somewhere that's your favorite book.
It is my favorite book.
It's your favorite book. Okay. Well,
Any other questions?
any other questions?
Let's see.
Who are your, Sala Grace asked, what are a few of your favorite writers? Or who are a few of your favorite writers?
I've been influenced greatly by, Hemingway. My father turned me on to Hemingway. In my early years, I was influenced by him. I have not so much anymore, but John Steinbeck, his sense of place, I continue to strive to be able to create a sense of place and a compassion for all of the underdogs in our society that Steinbeck was able to portray so beautifully in his work. Harper Lee. I wish Go Set a Watchman had never been published. J.D. Salinger, I go back to his work time and time again. Our own F. Scott Fitzgerald here in Minnesota, our native son. So I read a lot of the classics. Currently, sort of modern day writers. I love the work of Kristen Hanna, Nightingale and Four Winds. So there, I've named several.
Okay. Can we recommend one? Did you read?
You're gonna say it because I'm thinking it.
Yeah, did you read We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker?
No, I haven't.
Okay, please read that book and get back to us.
Okay. We begin at the end.
We begin at the end.
Okay.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it was a really wonderful story and very much in the vein of how you write yours.
Yes, I think you would really enjoy it. So.
Okay. Thanks for the recommendation.
Yes. And Evelyn did want to know, at what point in your career did you become a full-time writer? Full-time writer.
So I got the contract for Iron Lake, and it was a 2-book contract. And then when I signed the contract for my 3rd book, Purgatory Ridge, my wife said, Kent, you have always wanted to do nothing but write. It's time to do nothing but write. And so that was in 1999. I stepped away.
Wonderful. That is, what a supportive partner she sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's terrific.
That's fantastic. Well, we are at is there another?
Someone, Evelyn
actually,
agreed. What a wonderful woman
she is.
Indeed.
Well, we're at the end of our program. We want to thank you so much, Ken, for joining us today. This was fantastic. Really a highlight for
us. I know our staff has all been reading. We've been all reading Lightning Strike since it came out, and talking about it every morning. Did you finish? Did you finish?
Yeah.
So you have a lot of fans here at the Oceanside Library, and obviously, our participants as well. Thank you for joining us. We love that you share, and Syosset Library too.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing these wonderful stories with us, Kent. Really, they are beautiful.
We appreciate
Well, it's been my pleasure, and you have just been so delightful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care, and if I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'll drop in and say hi.
Yes,
must.
please, definitely.
Yes.
We hold you to it.
Take care, everyone. Keep
Have a
reading.
good night.
Thank you. Take care.